Okay, this is video number 10 in our Jefferson Flats series. In the last video, we left off with a profile that I had just created, a surface profile. And the only thing that I have added to that are these labels. So I went through, I clicked on each structure and pipe, and I selected this add label. And I have the name only label style selected, so it put the label, the name of each structure and pipe through this profile. That was the first profile I created. Now, in the last video, I had created a second alignment, and you can see I've got that second alignment selected here. And I did create a profile for that alignment. So I have two profiles now, and I did add the labels to those parts in my profile view so that I could highlight the overlapping pipes and structures. So notice this HVNPO3 structure. This structure right here shows up on both of my profiles. So HVNPO3, and that is the structure where my two alignments intersect. Right, so this is the point at which everything downstream will show up in both profile views. Again, you don't have to do it that way. You can only build partial profiles for different branches of your network. If you do that, though, it's recommended that you not only show the starting catch basin and downstream pipe, but then also show the structure that is common to both profile views. So again, if I was only going to build a small network to represent maybe this pipe and structure, because in my first profile I'm showing all of this network starting from this structure. If I don't want to create an entire profile view for this other alignment, I could just show this first structure, this first pipe, but I would also want to show this structure where those two alignments overlap. So just one point there. But now that I have these profiles built, I'm ready to place them vertically. So I need to maintain 7.5 feet of cover, and I would like to stay as close to 0.5% as possible so that I don't end up way too deep here at my outlet. So a couple of different ways you could maintain that 7.5 feet of cover. One maybe easy way to do it is if I just create a circle. So C for circle, and I'm going to snap that right to the top of this first structure. And I just want to see how much cover do I have to start. So I'll snap that to the top of this first pipe. So notice I've got the center of the circle at the top of the structure, and then I just brought it down and snapped it to the top of this pipe. Now if I look at the properties of that circle, it will show me the radius. That'll give me the distance between the top of the structure and the top of the pipe. And if I look at that radius, it says 31.9, call it 32 feet. Well, 32 feet is a very deep structure. The reason that it is showing me 32 feet is because these profile views default to a 10 times vertical exaggeration. So notice the grid here is a square, but horizontally we're looking at 100 feet, and vertically we're looking at 10 feet. So again, the vertical is exaggerated by a factor of 10. So knowing that, if I look at the properties again, 31.9, well, that's really 3.19 feet. If I divide this by 10, it's telling me there's 3.19 feet between the top of my structure and the top of the pipe. And obviously that is not fulfilling the 7.5 foot minimum cover rule. So I can create a circle, snapping again to the top of the structure, which should line up with my surface. That's the reason I'm snapping there. And if I need 7.5 feet of cover, I can type 75. I want a 75 foot radius on that circle because of the 10 times vertical exaggeration. And so now notice this is the surface, and way down here is 7.5 feet of cover. Well, I should be able to just grab that pipe, and I have the pipe selected and the circle selected so that I can take this grip edit for the top of the pipe and snap that to the bottom quadrant of this circle. So now this end of the pipe would have 7.5 feet of cover. Obviously the rest of the pipe does not yet. But I can now take this circle and move it to my next structure. And if I place that right here at the center of the structure, now I can move the other end of the pipe down to make sure I am fulfilling that 7.5 feet of cover. And while I have that circle here on the second structure, I can move on to the next pipe and snap that down in such a way where I now have 7.5 feet of cover. And I could move through the profile pretty quickly and just making sure I'm fulfilling that minimum cover. And some of you may notice right away there's a couple of problems with doing it this way, and we'll catch up to that. But let me move some of these pipes down a little further. And again, I'm just making sure I have 7.5 feet of cover. That's the only thing I'm doing with this circle right now. And I'm just snapping that. The diamond is the top grip edit for the pipe, and I'm snapping that to the bottom of my circle. And one more structure to go. Almost there. And then I do not have a structure at my outlet point yet, but if I needed to, I would. This would definitely happen at a manhole structure. I just don't have that in my drawing. So for right now, I will leave that alone, assuming that I've got 7.5 feet of cover for most of this. But you are going to have to look and see what your surface is doing here. Notice my surface goes down a little bit, and if I select kind of this low point right there, and again make my 75-foot circle, I need to make sure that my pipe is staying below that. So in this case it is not, and maybe I need to drag my pipe down a little bit just to make sure I'm getting that 7.5 feet of cover. Another thing to note, and I'm going to undo real quick, go back a few steps. Notice also that as I go through and maintain my 7.5 feet of cover, well, that may not result in pipe flowing the right direction. This is supposed to be the upstream side, and this is the downstream side, but when I moved that pipe to get my 7.5 feet of cover, well, now the pipe appears to be flowing in the wrong direction. So you'll have to go through and make sure you've got your correct pipe slope and that it's flowing in the right direction. But also, as you are moving downstream in your pipe network, notice I have two different sized pipes here. And I would rather have my inverts, the bottoms of the pipe, line up versus having the crowns of these pipes line up. And maybe depending on the part of the world you're in, you have to maintain your energy grade line. But for this project, I'm going to keep it simple and just say I want the inverts to line up. And so if I select both of these pipes on either side of a structure, I get all of the grip edits, and I can make these two grip edits line up, snap them to each other so that my inverts do align. Right now I don't have any drop through the structure, but that is really sort of a key component here. Is if I line up the inverts, that should help with correcting your slope also, so that you're maybe flowing in the right direction. But then also be aware, if you have any low spots in your surface, you can put that circle, snap the center of the circle to a low spot, make sure you've got a 75-foot radius, and then again maybe adjust your pipes manually to get them to fall under that 7.5 feet, and then I would have to make my inverts line up with the next pipe downstream. So a couple of things to think about there. Again, for this particular project, we're going to try to maintain 7.5 feet of cover and at as close to a 0.5% downstream as possible. I will continue this process, and in the next video I'll show you what these profiles look like after I have completed the adjustment.